Hello guys, and welcome back to my next tutorial. In this episode what I'm going to be going over is a very simple and quick camera controller and a mesh controller. So if you press a button then the mesh turns to the camera, but also when you move the mesh then the camera will update to that position of the mesh. So if I quickly switch over to that so I can show you. So if I turn the camera and the camera just rotates around the player, and you can speed this up as well. So if I, for example, go up the stairs, it follows it quite well. If I just, so yeah. Anyway, let's start making this. So I'm just going to quickly get rid of everything that I've just done. So, start anew. We're going to be making two very simple functions and a little bit of setup, as you just saw with the event tick and an input. So let's get started with the more simple of the two controllers, which is making the camera follow the mesh. To do that, let's go to a function, add a new one, set camera to mesh. Now we're going to be using some vector maths here to calculate the rotation between the two that's needed. But first we're going to drag off the execution mode for the function, and we're going to type in add controller your input. Now your, if you go to the viewport, is basically the equivalent of this angle here, the z-axis. The value is between 0 and 1, so what we need to do is we need to find a way to get an angle between 0 and 1 that we can control a lot easier, really easily. So to do that, we're going to get the camera manager, and we're going to get, we're going to drag off the mesh as well. Return value for this, forward vector, Control W to oh yeah, mesh is not actor, just get forward vector then. So what this is going to do is it's going to retrieve where both of these components and actors are facing, and we're then, from these, we're going to find the dot product. We're going to do the 2D one because we don't care about the z. All the z is going to do is complicate things, so we need to find just the x and y. So if we convert these to 2D just by dragging them in, it'll do the conversion for us. Now the dot product will find the cosine of the angle between the two vectors. Imagine two lines intersecting. This dot product will find the cosine of the angle between the two based on the direction that they're both going, but that's complicating things a lot further, and I want to keep this as simple as possible. To control the speed of this, we're going to times this float value by a float. Plug that into the value, and this is going to be a new variable. With camera turn speed. And it's going to, mine's defaulted to 1, which is good. Now, the reason that we're using the dot product to find the cosine of the two angles is because when those two angles are parallel to, when those two lines are parallel to one another, that angle becomes 0, which means that no inputs added to this, which means the camera stops rotating. And only when that value deviates from 0 does it start to bring it back, which is why we're using this. And this function here is called every tick, which is why we need to make sure that it eventually returns to 0. So we compile it and go back. What? Set camera to mesh. It did. Oh, it didn't default to 1. Okay. I was going to say. So if I turn it and it brings it back, if I can control the mouse and bring it around the character, but it defaults back to that position. You can have it so that when you're moving the mouse, that it stops it from turning, but that's complicating things a lot more than it needs to be. Speaking of complicating things, let's move on to the next one, which is setting the mesh to the camera. Now, since this requires a lot more functionality that we have to build ourselves, considering that the camera has its own controller built into this blueprint, we need to do a bit more functionality behind the scenes for this one. So set mesh to camera, and for this one what we're going to want to do is set the actor, set actor rotation. Sorry, I got a bit confused then, because the reason that I got a bit confused was because I thought, okay, the mesh needs to be the target for this one, but then I realised no, because that will mess up the animations. If you rotate the mesh, then when you play the animation and move it at the same time, it could be walking in one direction but moving in another. So imagine it moving horizontally to the player, but the animation is playing towards the player. That wouldn't look right, so we need to rotate the actor as a whole. Now, the new rotation is going to come by breaking this to a different struct, and we're going to take the Z value out here, and we're going to f-interp 2. This is, the F stands for float, it's a float interpolation function. Now the delta time we're going to drag off here, get world delta seconds. The interp speed, we're going to promote that to a variable, mesh turn speed. The current and the target we're going to get from the mesh. First, the current, no, not from the mesh, no, not from that, the follow camera, there we go. No. Better way would be getting the camera manager again. Sorry. My mind's a bit muddled today, it's been a long week. Get rotation. Get camera rotation and break this. Break it. I'm just going to drag these down. No, not you. These. So Z is going to be our current and our target. If we get crying out loud, the Z is going to be our target, not our current. And if our current is going to come from get actor rotation, I'm going to break this into that, and that's going to go into there. Now, what we need to now is drag these values into here. So remember, we're setting it, we're not adding anything to it, so we need to maintain the X and Y rotation. Otherwise we can get some really weird stuff going on. Oh, for crying out, I've just realised I've done this. This needs to be, if we control X on this, we'll just store that for later. The target, we're going to drag out and we're going to promote this to a variable. We're going to call this mesh turn target. Originally I had this as a rotator, but I just realised that that's kind of a wasted amount of space, considering we're only interested in one aspect of it. So if we have this like that, then that will make our lives a lot easier. Now we don't want this to continue indefinitely, even though we are calling it every tick, or every tick when it's appropriate. So what we want to do is from this return value, we want to do nearly float. And this will, we need to apply that to the target. So yeah, this will basically check if the interpolated value is nearly equal to our target float, i.e. if it's nearly equal to the rotation that we want. Now, if we add in a return value, or return node, and hook that up there, and hook this return value up there. Now, our error tolerance, I'm going to put mine to 0.01. Yeah. That basically means how close do the two need to be before it triggers true. Now, this will return false nearly always. So what we want to do is in the event graph, when we set it up, we want this to be run on if it's not true yet. Or alternatively, which is what I'm going to do, is we're going to do a not equal to boolean that will invert this value and make it so that if it's not equal to, or if it's not nearly equal, then keep running this until it is. So in the event graph, we're going to get the event tick, and we're going to get branch, which is going to maintain true for now. If we set mesh to camera, and from the return value, we're going to set this to a condition that this is going to be runoff. So let's set that up now. 1. If when we press this, we want to set this condition here. So let's just promote this to a variable real quick and set this can turn. You can call it whatever you want. I'm just calling it can turn for now, and we're going to set this to true to spark off this, and we're going to set this here so that only when it's no longer, when it is nearly equal to the target, will it stop the tick. So the next thing here is to set the turn target, which remember is the z value off of the thing that we copied and pasted. So let's just paste that in and get the z value into there. If you remember how I did that, then just copy down what I've done here, pause it, do whatever you need to do. Yeah, and I think that's it. If I disconnect this up here, because that will obviously mess up the code, if I play it and go over here, it sets it to the rotation that I'm facing. So yeah, that's how to do 2 very simple ways to do a camera rotation and a mesh rotation. If you've got any other suggestions or feedback for me, just leave them down in the comments. I'll read all of them. And if you're waiting on that FootIK video, don't worry, it is coming. I just thought that I'd get this out of the way first because it's a lot easier to do and a lot easier to explain. And yeah, I'm just messing around with the FootIK to make it as easy for you guys to understand. And yeah, I hope to get that done by Saturday. If you've got any other requests, please leave them down below. I do love reading your suggestions. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.